Good afternoon. Thanks for being here, and I hope everybody got a cup of coffee so you're wide awake. We're going to try to be entertaining and informative right now. We'll start with Rochelle down on the end and just come down the line for a brief introduction
All right.
of yourself and your company.
And we have to be humorous or entertaining, you said?
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
great. No
entertaining.
pressure. I'm Rachelle Carpenter. I'm the Chief People Officer at a company called Apryse, and we are a software company in the document processing space.
Hi, everybody. Judith Almendra. I have global responsibility for human capital and talent acquisition at TTEC, and we do everything related to customer experience from consulting. We have about 65,000 employees around the world.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Hitt, just married to Jessica Liebelt, so got to catch up on that one. I am a Vice President HR Business Partner for TIAA, which is a financial services company, which you'll see in the skyline in downtown Denver.
And I'm Mel Faxon. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Mirza, and we remove childcare as a barrier for working parents.
Great. Thanks, guys. We're going to start out with a little personal question for everybody since we're talking about like whole person management. I wanted each of the panelists to talk about a time in their work career when someone that they worked for showed that they cared about them. My personal one would be when my mom was diagnosed with terminal cancer. My boss said, go ahead and start applying for family leave now and get that paperwork going. So when you need to go, you're ready to go. And I had no idea that I would have needed to do that. And it just showed that somebody was looking out for me at work in a time of crisis. So we'll go this way now, reverse order. So Mel, you go first on this one, please.
Well, the boss actually I had in Denver texted me one day. We'd gotten a foot of snow and said, "Do you want a snow day tomorrow?" And I said, "Absolutely, yes." But I think that same boss, this is back in 2015, kind of prior to COVID, to flexible work, really just made it a prerogative to allow us to participate in things outside of work. So I was coaching a lacrosse team, for example, in the community, and just recognizing that we have life that's not just our job was really great, and that flexibility to leave early a couple of days a week and then come back and work when worked for me was just a nice recognition that we don't always have to be in the office from 9 to 5. We can make things work around our schedules too.
Awesome. Yeah, similar experience for me. So early in my career, when I was joining my first company, I didn't really think to ask for anything. I just thought I'd show up, do my job, try to be really good at it, and then go home. But for some reason, I was had this passion inside me that I really wanted to get involved in volunteering and nonprofit work. And everyone around me was talking about boards, and I didn't know what it meant to be on a board when I was, just out of college. But I was pushed in the right direction to get in some good volunteer opportunities and to the same thing, appreciate that there are ways you can grow outside of the office that can be really valuable. So I always credit that first manager for getting me on a path of volunteerism and nonprofit work.
For me, I've been at tech for about 16 years, and I always look for organizations that actually connect with me in terms of our values. 15 years ago, when I was relatively new to the organization, I was invited to participate in a meeting with our CEO. He has 70,000 employees, so I was just one more in the meeting, actually listening to the conversation. And I was super excited. It was a great opportunity for me to hear from our CEO directly. I had my cell phone. I always forget to turn it off. And the cell phone started ringing. I interrupted the meeting, and it was my mom to let me know that my father had a massive heart attack and he was in a very critical condition. It was, since I interrupted the meeting, obviously I was visually distressed. The CEO stopped the conversation, came to me, asked me what was going on. I shared with him my experience or what was happening. I was obviously feeling a high level of anxiety. Not only I had interrupted the company meeting, but also, what was happening to me personally. I flew to Mexico because that's where my family is at, and he called and emailed every single day just to see how my father was doing. And he offered to bring him to the US in case that he needed better medical support. So it was something that really touched me in a very personal way, and it's hard not to even get emotional about it. And it makes me just connect with organizations at a different level.
Wow, that's really powerful.
Yeah.
For me, it was quite a few years ago, before COVID. Similarly, not working from home a lot, not a lot of flexibility. Going into the office every day. My husband was deployed to Afghanistan for a year, and I had two boys at home, and they needed to stay active. They needed me to be a parent. But I also had a pretty high responsibility role in the organization, and so I also had an hour commute each way because I live in Colorado Springs and it was in Denver. My boss came to me and offered the opportunity of being flexible, which today I think we all think a lot more about. But for me, that was really, really big because working from home wasn't a thing. And the care he showed for me so that I could do both, be successful in my role and continue growing in my role versus being stagnant, and taking care of my children while their dad was in Afghanistan was something that meant the world to me. And it was just such a little thing, but it was so personal, and it was such a thing. And in being open about it and talking to the team, because not everyone had the same situation, not everyone did the same thing, and everyone rallied around it. And so it was just really, really special for me.
All right. So we're talking about whole person management. And how do your companies define that? And how do you figure out like what it is your employees are asking of you to provide this? So Jessica, if you would explain to us like how you gauge what workers want.
Yeah. So I'll start with how do we define it? So we have a phrase of bring your whole self to work. So that really means what's going on at home, what's going on in the office, what's going on in the world. It's acknowledging that life doesn't stop and start every time you walk in and out of the building. So we really keep it very fluid on what that looks like because it's very individual. Now, how we kind of make value out of it more so in that second part, and how we really make sure that it's impactful for everyone in listening is we really start by actively listening. So I'm sure everybody here has engagement surveys and everybody here has one-on-ones with their managers and a safe way to speak up and elevate those concerns. And I think the biggest thing that we do is we listen and then we quickly try to implement solutions when we can and then show people through that value of we listened, this is what we did, this is how it's going.
All right, Judith.
Yes, in addition to some of the pieces that Jessica mentioned, for us, our purpose as an organization is to deliver humanity to business. So we try to make sure that we do that and represent that in all the aspects of the employee life cycle. But in addition to the engagement surveys and those pieces, we also have an employee sentiment that employees can tell us at any time how are they feeling about the organization or how are they feeling. So it's kind of like when you go to you go to the airport and they have those smiley faces, right, where you can click. So they have the ability to do that. And we just introduced that a lot for our new employees because there's a lot of anxiety that comes with getting into a new job and a new organization. So we started to test it with our new employees, and it has been very successful. Just allowing us to make sure that they have the ability to tell us that they are not feeling well, and for us to take actions. So we have a lot of other technologies and intervention points to make sure we are supporting them.
And over the years, Rochelle, have you seen things change of what people expect? Like after the pandemic, or
Sure.
people are more open talking about their mental health now than they
Sure.
used to be? Like what's changed?
Yeah. Well, obviously the flexibility is up there. I think you've heard some of the other speakers talking. I think employees are really looking for a culture that's caring, right? Really making sure that you care about your employees. It's not just about the medical and the dental benefits anymore. The last speaker was talking about, a lot of folks that we hire now, they want the childcare benefits versus maybe a retirement. When it comes to mental health, I think that's a really significant piece because I think that it was always quiet before, right? There wasn't a lot of talking, and so I think employees and employers who really care are trying to make that something that you can talk about freely, and not be ashamed of it if you're struggling with it, if no matter what it is. And so I think a lot of the focus on that. And really, really caring for the individual and what that need is around, especially if it's around mental health, but just in general, that how do you care about each employee, and take their differences and what they need in mind when you're dealing with it.
Okay. Great. Thank you. And one of the things like I'm curious about is how do you build trust with employees to be open? Because often like I know, especially earlier in my career, the last thing I wanted was to interact with HR because it meant trouble. And like it just no, I'm not going. Um, and so
Sounds
like
like fun.
yeah, it's like I just don't. One time we had a work softball team, and whoever our newsroom, and this was in Kentucky, signed us up, and they accidentally put us in a men's league that wouldn't let the women play, and so the women couldn't play, and it turned into a big HR mess. And I was just like, no, 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 I don't want to be involved in this. I'm really not upset about it. Anyway, that was an aside. Mel, let's talk about trust and how do you get employees to like come to you and be honest about what's going on and what the company can do to help.
It's a great question. We have employees in 5 different countries. We're fully remote. And so that trust is a lot harder to build virtually. And a lot of what we try to do is almost you have trust until you break it and just assume that we have very flexible working hours. We have a lot, like the only requirements are kind of core meeting hours and let people manage their day outside of that. We're not tracking what times they're working as long as work's getting done. And I think that inherent just knowledge that, we trust you to manage your day like an adult is really powerful to start. And then when employees have issues, one of our employees, their son was in the hospital for almost a month. And, he was so stressed about, is this unpaid leave? Is it paid? And we just said, do what you need to do. We're not even going to ask questions about it. Take care of, like, it's kind of a life or death situation. Like, that's what it is. So I think just giving people the reassurance that when life happens, that is the priority and that we're kind of a secondary thing and can be there to support them is how we've tried to do it at least. But
All right, Jessica.
Yeah, I would just tie it back to one of the earlier conversations around data. So I think trust is built also by delivering. So if you've listened and you haven't taken action, that's the same as losing trust. You had the opportunity to do something and you didn't do it. So now why would I ask you to solve this next thing? So I think it comes back to a lot on building trust by delivering, and by delivering, you're meeting their needs. And it's just a nice cycle that'll continue to kind of give.
Yeah. If I may add, yes, I couldn't agree with you more. I think the actions speak louder than words, right? So I think it's continuing to demonstrate that. So also your people managers are so important in that relationship. For us, 8 out of 10 of our managers, we put so much focus on career growth that 8 out of 10 of our managers actually came from the front line. So many of them have never managed a person before. So it was very common for them to not know how to handle different situations or difficult conversations. So giving them the tools and resources and training, we put together something like we call it a rail play bot, which allows them it is an artificial intelligence platform that allows them to practice different interactions. And it's a really helpful way for them to feel comfortable and be in a safe zone and practice. And it tells you like, but you didn't ask this question or you didn't do these things. So it's just giving our people managers the tools and resources and remove the taboo, as you were saying, around some difficult discussions, including mental health.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is I think for a people and culture or HR organization, it's really important. You have to be out there. I remember starting in a job and leading an HR team, and their offices were all in the back, down the 4 hallways, behind the locked door. Right. And so one of the first things I did was I changed that, and they all came out on the floor. And just being with the team, right? Being with the employees, that builds trust because you're out there with them, learning their roles, right? Having the business acumen, I think builds a lot of trust as well because they know their business. And then I think it's what you guys have already said as well, which is, listen, take action. Because if you listen and don't take action, then your trust just goes right down.
Yeah, I like that idea of moving the locked door,
Yeah.
moving about.
They
That,
didn't
that
love
would feel
it,
like
but I
the
loved it.
principal's office and like middle
Exactly.
school.
That's what I
right?
felt like. Yeah.
Oh, she's going back there. She's
Yeah.
in
That's
trouble,
right.
right? That's great. Does anybody else? I was fascinated when we all got together before to talk about what we're doing. That Judith's company actually uses AI for HR needs. Do any of the other companies that y'all represent use some kind of HR or AI to like figure out what employees need and want?
Yeah, so we do. So we use AI through our survey vendor Glint, and it helps us analyze some of the comments that come back in the survey to help identify trends. You know, anytime when you're dealing with thousands of verbatims, it's really taxing to read each one of those individually. And while it is our expectation that the people managers do read all the verbatim comments from their team, we know at the top of the house at HR, going through thousands and thousands of fields of individual typed in data just isn't effective. So we do use AI for that.
So the AI like grabs like common themes and like sorts it out for you to see like what rises to the top of what people need.
Correct.
Okay. And people trust that too, because I know we're all a little leery of AI and where that's
It's
going in the
trust, but
future.
verify. So we trust, but we need to go back and look at some of these verbatims to make sure that it's pulling out the right themes.
And do you feel like people are honest on their forms and questionnaires and how they answer?
Yes. I mean, I don't know about all of you, but we spend a lot of time making sure people understand the anonymity of our employee engagement surveys, and we do a lot to protect that. So our surveys are 100% anonymous, and all the associates really recognize that.
How often do your companies do those employee engagement surveys to read the temperature of thousands of people?
I mean, for us is we have some more formal approaches, so where we do it on a quarterly basis. But and the reason why we implemented this like happy face approach is because it allows you to also get that sentiment real time. I think it's also about for people to understand that there are multiple different channels for them to communicate. You don't have to wait for a survey to. You should be connected to our people, right? Focus groups, conversations, one-on-ones, all of those forums are forums in which you can continue to gather information and gather, details about what our people are looking for, what are the pieces that are most important to them, what are the actions we need to take immediately. So keeping a good employee sentiment, a good pulse on your employees is key. You don't have to wait for the survey, although the surveys give us some very rich data. And again, the action planning after the survey is probably the most important component.
Okay. And once you get all that information, another huge piece of the job that as a reporter I find very important is communication. And so often you hear employees go, "Oh, I didn't know what that was," or like I was an editor for a while, and like employees would come and ask, "Do you have the EAP phone number?" Because nobody could find it anywhere. It wasn't easy to find. And then they were shy about admitting that covering trauma and violence as a reporter, you need help. And so like people knew that I was personally getting help for some of the things we were dealing with, especially during the pandemic. Anyway, so how do you get that information back out to the employees? Well, I guess we'll start with Rochelle and just come back down to
Yeah.
Mel.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I found to be really important to do, and I've done in my last few jobs, is just it's pretty simple, but it's education. And it's ongoing education around the benefits that you have and what that all entails, so that if you are the person who needs the EAP, like in your situation, and you may not feel comfortable going and talking to your manager or somebody in the HR team, you are aware of it because you're educated on it. And you would be surprised, well, maybe you won't, but many people are surprised at how little people know about their actual benefits and how deep they go. If there's an EAP or if there's financial coaching or things like that. And so one of the real simple things that I've always made sure that we do is it's just continual education series, not just at open enrollment, right? But continual education series to really make sure that they understand what their benefits are, and followed up with maybe a newsletter that might highlight something for that month and share something specific. Like, did you know the EAP line number is whatever that is, right? And you just want to keep those things in front of your employees so that they can take advantage of them. And also, if they're not somebody who feels comfortable coming forward for whatever their need is, they still know that they're supported and they're covered, and that they can take advantage of those types of benefits.
Yeah, for us, very similar. We obviously education, I think, is very important. We use multiple different channels, whether it's email, text, your intranet, our social intranet, and we try to put it together in a way that it tackles the different themes that we actually hear from our employees. When it comes to well-being, for example, we have a whole campaign around "It's okay, we're all human," and it basically highlights all the different aspects of our program, which is mind, body, finance, community, and purpose. So we try to package those things also to make it digestible. Sometimes we send too much information to our employees, so just to make sure that they can connect to what are the things that are most important to them and what are the things that they feel would be more beneficial for them. So packaging the information in a way that is easy to digest as you are putting together your action plans is always key. Has always been key for us.
I'd say something we do that's a little bit unique. So we incorporate culture and engagement in every conversation. We just find a way to basically bring it up. But one unique way we do it is through our business resource groups, which some people call employee resource groups, particularly when we have Heritage Month. So right now, this is our Disabilities Heritage Month. So we're doing all sorts of events talking about Alzheimer's or preparing your family for retirement or an aging workforce. And just right there, we could slip in information more about our benefits, or we could talk to you about retiring with dignity aligned to our whole philosophy. So we try to be creative, but consistent. It's all about the consistency of messaging and taking advantage of every avenue.
We are a much smaller organization, I would say. So we're about 20 people. So it's a little bit different in our instance. But I'm definitely taking notes when we grow from all of this. A lot of it is just making sure we have weekly all hands, we have monthly all hands, just in the ability to constantly reiterate to folks. And then again, when you think about 5 different countries, the benefits are never going to be the same. So it's making sure we reach out to individuals in those different areas. But
So how do you put together these business resource groups? And is it management puts it together, or do you ask employees, like, is there something you're interested in? Do you want to organize it? But then you like run the risk of, like, always hear a lot of complaints from when companies are trying to build DEI groups, that the people of color in the office are the ones who have the burden of having to do it. And so how do you build those for your employees and find out what they're interested in?
Yeah. So I can talk from a perspective of a company that has them, and as far as growing them. So my first piece of advice is if you have a group that's maybe frustrated and saying, why isn't there a group for us? Listen. And if it makes sense, do it and let the momentum kind of carry it through. We do have executive sponsors for all of our business resource groups. So there's always going to be a business connection with some of that EC level sponsorship. We then have chapters across the entire country. So they're not just at our hub locations like Charlotte or New York where we're largest. They're out in the field, they're virtual, they're meeting the events and meeting the people where they are at that time to be most available. When it comes to how do you start a group or how do you really get that off the ground? I think it's just having an honest conversation with the leaders around the table and say, is this something that you feel like you should invest in? Because there's a lot of data that shows you that it is. There's a lot of data proving that being inclusive and making sure that individuals feel more comfortable at the place that they spend the majority of their waking hours is going to help you financially. So once you get past that business case, setting them up is kind of the easier part.
That's right.
Judith, do y'all have those groups?
We do, and fortunately, I think we had a lot of employees very, very passionate about those specific affinity groups. So yes, we have about. We started with one. We started with our Women in Leadership group, and also we were able to demonstrate. What we had found was a lot of our females were not necessarily participating in our development programs, mentorship programs, and so we had a lot of data, and we had shown how all the efforts of that employee resource group has actually influenced the way that the organization is structured. We have more women in management roles, in executive roles now than we had before, and other groups started to get put together. So we have about 6 now, and our people with disabilities was the last one that was created. And I think they keep coming up all the time. So I think the creation is actually the easiest part, and I think now but the executive sponsorship is very key.
Okay, I like that idea. Rachelle, do y'all have these business groups? Bergs, is that the acronym?
Employee resource group business. We are starting. So I am part of an organization that in the last 2 years, we've done 12 acquisitions. So our team and our organization also rebranded in February, and we brought in a whole new leadership team last summer. So we are, kind of getting ourselves prepared for continued growth. But one of the things, one of the values that our employees helped to create as our new branded company was strengthen our differences. And so we've really been relying on that, and things are starting to happen more organically, which has been really nice to see because I've come from organizations where we had to put it out there and then employees, kind of came forward, but they're actually coming to us. It's one of the priorities we have, but they started coming to us before we even, had to go out there. And it's starting with not necessarily an employee resource group, but it's more of a community connections group that's coming together. And they're starting to become that group of people, the confidants that we go to find out what ear to the ground for us, right? And they're the ones who are helping to figure out what should we be celebrating and what should we be looking into. And so we're just getting started with that. But I think it's been really cool for me to see because it's a very different way that I've seen it organically grow and become. We're focusing on getting a women's group together, and we'll continue down the path, but that's where we've gotten started. So if you're part of a small organization or you're part of an organization that doesn't have it, I think doing things like that and letting the employees really take the lead and then helping to support them is a really great way to get that going too. Because what's going to come out of it are the groups are going to form that they really, really want. And I think having the employees lead that is a really great thing.
Great. And Jessica hit on this a little bit about the investment and worth it. So I wanted to ask Mel, since you help companies figure out childcare for employees, and when people are like looking at the expense or like, I don't know, like how do you convince them or like this is worth investing in for your employees? Like what's the value there when they have to fork out some money?
That's a great question. So if you want to break it down into dollars and cents, let me see what my math is going to look like mentally. If you've got a 1,000-person organization, parents on average miss about 9 days of work per year due to childcare related needs. That costs you, if they're making $20 an hour, it's about $432,000 of just lost productivity from your parents just missing days of work. So if you take that same spend and invest it in stipends, it's something like you can offset costs for each of those parents about $1,500 for the year. You can then take advantage of federal tax credits that are about $150,000 a year. 23 states offer incentives for employers who are offsetting care costs. So you actually only spend about $200,000. So you're actually saving a pretty big delta and cutting out that loss of productivity. So there's pretty easy math, turnover being kind of the key thing to look at, but it's a pretty small spend for what you're actually saving down the line. And then think about the soft costs of knowledge loss, networking, onboarding new people, recruitment costs as well. So I'm happy to do math with anyone.
Yeah. And Jessica, you hit on it. So Judith, do y'all see value?
Oh, 100%. I think there are so many stressors, right, that we have in our lives, and it could be, childcare, financial stress. It could be just work related. There are so many different aspects. We actually have been very purposeful about trying to measure that in our environment because we have a lot of contact centers. A lot of things are measured. Something that we recently introduced is kind of like what we call our stress index. And it measures multiple different variables of this individual's job. And there are certain pieces that makes someone more stressed, less breaks, less days off or not consecutive days off and those kind of things. And it contributes to people actually feeling highly overwhelmed. The more overwhelmed, the less likely to be productive, the more likely to leave the organization. And the loss of productivity that you have as a result of that, we trained our employees, it can be weeks. So there's a significant investment that goes with that. So once you put together all those numbers, I mean, the math it doesn't lie. Like Jessica was saying, right? There's tons of data, external data, but I think just looking at your organizations internally, any information you had, and if it's not as measured as we are in our organizations, sometimes you can just do an A/B testing on certain programs and see the difference that it makes in the different groups of employees when you introduce specific investments to them.
How do these programs translate? Because like we talk about like a flexible work schedule, and if you need to go take care of an aging parent or a child or coach lacrosse, but how do you translate these into places where they're hourly workers like Amazon warehouses? a meat packing company where there's hourly workers and you have to have people on the line or the job doesn't get done. Do y'all have any insight into how these things translate the whole person management in those kinds of jobs?
I mean, for us, it's just you just have to make the time within as part of their schedules to make sure when it's highly structured environments, to make sure that, like I said, that there are the appropriate breaks. That if they need to they need to do a time out, that you actually allows them to do that. That if someone needs to take time off, that you allow them to do that, and that they have the channels and venues. We have an employee assistance program if someone needs to talk confidentially with a counsel about something a little bit more serious where you need that level of support. So there are things that you need to structure. There are certain jobs within our environment that tend to be maybe a little bit more stressful than others. When you're dealing with customers on the line that lost a loved one or things like that. So not all jobs are created equal too. So we take those things into consideration as well. There are some programs that require and some aspects of the jobs that require additional level of resources and support, maybe counseling on site, and those kind of things.
Okay. Does anybody else have any insight on?
I was just going to say a key focus for us is the hourly workforce. And so what we do is we leverage available government dollars for that workforce. So even if an employer doesn't have a budget per se to have them be fully benefit eligible, we can help them get access to available government programming. And so really just thinking through that population that's typically underserved doesn't necessarily have the same level of resources and maximizing the best way to help them. But and it can make a huge difference. So for sure.
Anyone else? Let's talk about some specific things your companies do because we were waiting in the green room. Y'all didn't know we had a green room. Fancy. Um, we were talking about some things, and somehow, it always turns to pets, right, for pet owners. And Judith mentioned that they offer like pet care, which I was surprised. So I just want to go down the line here and like talk about some of the specific things that your companies offer that you feel like are innovative or new, and like why you offer those things to employees.
Yeah, I think it's just for us, it has become just much more expensive, and we have a lot of pet owners, right? And I think it's part of listening to your employees and kind of like what are their needs. We had a lot of our population in the US used to be single moms, so we knew that childcare was very important for us. And more, especially post-pandemic, we're having more employees, that they don't necessarily they don't have kids, but they have pets. And especially as we return to office, it was important for them. It's very expensive. So starting to offer that as part of our benefits was important. We also launched a new app that I have to say I haven't checked it because I don't have a pet, but it's called Papao, and it basically is a service, a discounted service that allows you to have someone come to your home and take care of whether it's your pet or it could be a loved one that needs care while you go back to work for a few hours or whatever the case may be. So introducing those benefits, again, a lot of our programs and benefits, we look at them every year, make changes based on the feedback that we get from our employees, and that's how that one came along.
Again, I don't know that it's super unique, but what we're in the midst of doing right now is listening to our employees and finding out what they need, and really kind of digging in there. And, we're finding that their needs aren't so much like the pet insurance and pet care. That I love the pet care idea, but I think pet insurance has come up, right, for those that pets are a child for them, and so I think that's something that's new that's been coming along. For ours, we're mostly remote. We're remote first, and we have 5 hub locations. And what we're finding and hearing is that our employees just really want us to really focus on connectivity opportunities. They're feeling a little isolated. They're feeling like being at home and working remotely is great from a balance perspective, or being able to take the kiddos to school or take care of whatever you need to. But what they're missing out on is that connection with each other. And so we're really trying to focus in on how do we make those connections. And I don't have the silver bullet, so don't ask me that question. And if you have it, then tell me. But our connection community group has been helping a lot with trying to dig in with that, because we're just really finding that while the remote first environment is a really great thing, it's not a benefit to offer, but it's something to focus on them. And it also helps them from a mental health perspective. So not necessarily an added benefit like a pet insurance or something like that, but it's where we're at today. And one of the things we're really focusing on is meeting our employees where they're at, and that's where we're at. So that's really our heavy focus right now.
Jessica?
Sure. So I could kind of try to sneak in a couple, but one thing I'm particularly proud of is our paternal leave program. So that works for both parents, and it's pretty extensive at 16 weeks. But the unique thing about it is there is a offering for the mother, and it's called Milk Stork. So if you are traveling for work and you need to breastfeed and you're not near your home, there's a whole program kind of in place to help you be able to get your milk shipped back home to your child, which I've heard many stories of mothers how that's just invaluable to them. There's also a donation route through that too. If you're, breastfeeding and you don't get the milk back to your child, you can donate it otherwise. So it's just a very thoughtful program.
I work for a company that put that in. It's a great program.
Yeah.
Great program.
Yeah, I love what they're doing.
Mel, what are some things y'all are doing or
So
pitching to other
yeah, of
companies?
course. So we're obviously a very care-focused organization. And even if you look at just the medical expense, caregivers have 64% higher rates of hypertension, higher depression, anxiety. So from a medical impact, that's really powerful. We have 8 care days a year. So kind of going back to parents tend to miss 8 days a year, but on top of your vacation, if you have a care need come up, it's just no questions asked and you get 8. So that's a big one for us.
Yeah, and I'm curious about this employee connection and remote work because our newsroom is the same. We mostly work remote, and I felt horrible for the people who started after March 2020 because they would come to work at the Denver Post and they would see somebody. They might see a coworker on a screen, maybe not, because not every team would even have a video meeting. And nobody knew anybody, and journalists often move to new cities where they don't know anybody. So there was a lot of loneliness, just not feeling connected. And in our situation, like some of us reporters would like take it upon ourselves to like have something where people who are new would come. But how do companies, aside from your workers just feeling nice and saying, why don't you come over for spaghetti tonight or whatever, how do companies build that connection and get people involved and feel like they have we call them, people still use office spouse. Um, maybe not. Like your work. I have a friend that another employee coworker called us main buddies. Like, how does your main buddy feel about that? So we always say, so I have my main buddy at work, and that person, like, if you spill toothpaste in on your shirt or something, like helps you. Like, how do you make that connection with people?
I can go. I think Rachelle and I were talking about this too, because we
Okay,
both have
let's hear
pretty
from both of y'all.
international populations. Something for us is making sure we create at least 1 to 2 times a year where everyone can meet in person. And even just that 1 day or 2 day thing to go back out for another few months, it expedites relationship building and trust and productivity so much. Just having like in-person dynamics. So that's been a key focus for us. And then thinking about where we have hubs of employees, trying to structure more localized in-person get-togethers or co-working days too.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're trying to do. And we're trying to do it more regularly versus like, okay, quarterly, we all come together and we have a picnic or something. And so we're really trying to just focus in on having much more regular events in the office that draw people in. I think the other thing that we're doing too is when one of the things I do love about being in an office environment that was kind of, I don't know, water cooler conversations, I guess, or like your ear was to the ground because you'd be standing in line for coffee or wherever, and you'd hear things.
Right.
Or you have a problem, and so you grab that person and you go into a conference room and you whiteboard it out. One of the things we've been trying to do is when we see those moments, capturing it and then sharing it, because I think sometimes people forget. I think that what we've found is people just really forget how easily you can solve a problem. And again, I love the remote first environment for sure. And I know there's the whiteboarding tools on all of those, but I think it's just also reminding people about coming in and those connections that you make with people, and that you can build a relationship. So you can tell somebody they have toothpaste on their shirt, or salad in their tooth if they're on the video or whatever. And I think providing those opportunities has been something that we've, like I was telling you before, really focused on, and it's the ask that we've been given from our employees.
Great. Well, there's a flashing red light here on the floor, so I think that means that our time here is done. We really appreciate our panelists for sharing their knowledge, and thank you so much for sticking around and listening to us today.
Thanks.